Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce, Master degree for Administrative Science, Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role models which have excellent academicians and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes and policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the Administrative Science Act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce, Master degree for Administrative Science, Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role models which have excellent academicians and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes and policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the administrative science act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce, Master degree for Administrative Science, Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role models which have excellent academicians and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes and policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the administrative science act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for for Fiscal Administrative Science. Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce. Master degree for Administrative Science. Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role model which have excellent academician and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes in policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the Administrative Science act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science. Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science. Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce. Master degree for Administrative Science. Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers
Check,
or students,
Yes,
executive
yes.
development
Okay.
programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science in Universitas Indonesia is one of the pillars of education that
Check,
will not
check,
only
check,
produce
check,
graduates
check.
with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role model which have excellent academician and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes in policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the Administrative Science act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce, Master degree for Administrative Science, Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role model which have excellent academician and practitioners in Indonesia and the world. In every organization, changes in policies require important instruments to maintain the organization's existence and sustainability in the midst of rapid global changes. In this regard, the Administrative Science act as pivotal instruments to study, measure, control, and formulate better directions. And the Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is ready to produce excellent human resources who will be able to play vital roles in an organization. Currently, Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, has 5 academic programs. Bachelor degree for Public Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Fiscal Administrative Science, Bachelor degree for Governance of Commerce. Master degree for Administrative Science. Doctor degree for Administrative Science. Public Administration. Students in this program are prepared to become an excellent human resource in understanding the issue and development of governance and analyze various policies to deal with national, regional, as well as global challenges. Fiscal Administration. This program aims to create a capable human resource to understand tax policies and administration, as well as micro and macro taxation at the national level and international, to face the challenges of economy and globalization. Governance of Commerce. This program prepares students to meet challenges through the development of strategic leadership, entrepreneurship, and nurturing the innovative mindset to increase individual competitiveness in facing national, regional, and global challenges. The doctoral and master programs are designed to prepare human resources with qualifications capable of thinking strategically, critically, objectively, rationally, and systematically in various aspects of organizational governance, both public and private, both local, regional, national, and international. Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia establishes international collaboration with reputable institutions in terms of research, inbound and outbound lecturers or students, executive development programs, and double degree programs, including the presence of Faculty of Administrative Science, Universitas Indonesia, is one of the pillars of education that will not only produce graduates with specific knowledge in the fields of administration, but also be able to become role model, which have excellent academicians and practitioners in Indonesia and the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention, please? Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Dialogue Collaborative Leadership to Meet a Changing World. I am Farah Nisrina and will be your Master of Ceremony for today. It is such a tremendous honor to have the chance to stand here surrounded by great people. I hope that we all can enjoy our time and earn valuable insight from our long-awaited guest star. On behalf of PIA UI, I would like to say thank you for sparing your time coming here to Vice Dean of Academic and Student Affairs, PIA UI, Dr. Fibria Indriati MSc, Mr. Erwin Aksa, Mr. Syarif Cicip Sutarjo, Professor Dr. Eko Sutojo, Head of Department of Public Administration, Mr. Teguh Kurniawan, Head of Berbakti Semangat Indonesia Foundation. To mark the opening of this public dialogue event, we all will hear an opening speech from the Vice Dean of PIA UI, Dr. Fibria Indriati MSc. To Ms. Indri, the time and place are yours.
Okay, thank you para MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, Rahayu. Honorable Speaker, Mr. David Lo, Bapak Syarif Cicip Sutarjo, Bapak Erwin Aksa, as the Head of Yayasan Berbakti Semangat Indonesia, Head of Administrative, Head of Department and Management of Faculty of Administrative Science, and Prof. Eko, as the Professor of Faculty of Administrative Science, and my beloved colleagues of Faculty of Administrative Science, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the exciting public discussion or public dialogue on collaborative leadership to meet a changing world with our distinguished speaker, Mr. David Lo. Thank you, Mr. David. And also soft launching of our new study program, Magister Kebijakan Publik and Governance or MKPG in short. As a seasoned political strategic and campaign manager, Mr. Pro brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table. In the world that is constantly changing, it is important to understand how to lead collaboratively and navigate through challenges. We are grateful to have Mr. Pro here to share his insight and expertise with us. And furthermore, this public discussion is a part of seminar series of the 8th anniversary of the Faculty of Administrative Science Universitas Indonesia, or FIAUI, on March 10, 2023. For the past 8 years, FIAUI has been the leading institution in teaching, research, and community engagement, contributing to the development of the public sector and society. This seminar series is the testament to our commitment to advancing knowledge and fostering dialogues on critical issues in the field of administrative science. Today, we are also proud to introduce our new study program, Magister in Public Policy and Governance, or Magister Kebijakan Publik dan Governance. This program is designed to provide students with skills and knowledge needed through a combination of rigorous coursework, hands-on experience, and real-world application. Students will learn how to analyze complex policy issues, develop effective strategy for change, and work collaboratively with stakeholders from a diverse range of background. Ultimately, our program will prepare students to become future collaborative leaders in the field of public administration. On behalf of Faculty of Administrative Science, UI, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Yayasan Berbakti Semangat Indonesia, Pak Jijib dan Pak Erwin, for the generous sponsorship to our public discussion or dialogues today. We hope that this partnership will continue to flourish in the years ahead, and together we can make a meaningful contribution to the development of Indonesia, moreover to the world. Without further ado, I hereby open this public dialogue and hope that this discussion will serve as a platform for meaningful exchange and inspires us to have better collaboration toward a better future. So let's make this opportunity to learn, to connect, and to inspire each other. Thank you for joining us today. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom. Om Santi Santi Om. Namo Buddhaya Rahayu. Thank you.
Thank you for the noteworthy words, Ms. Indri. I hope this opening speech from Ms. Indri can elevate our spirit in this event. Also, I'm terribly sorry for Professor Dr. Eko Prasojo for pointing out the name wrong. Okay. Another exciting news we have prepared for you is that we have invited a remarkable independent journalist to interact and guide you during this event, Ms. Andini Effendi. Ms. Effendi holds a master's degree from New York University, concentrating in peacemaking and peace building. Ms. Effendi also won the Best Current Affairs Presenter at the Asian Television Awards in 2019 and 2020, and received the Elizabeth O'Neill Journalism Award from the Australian government. Without any further ado, let's give our warm welcome to Ms. Andini Effendi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore semuanya teman-teman. I think we need to cut straight to the point. Let's invite David Plouffe to give his monologue before we start the dialogue. Please give a warm welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Apa kabar? Thank you for hosting me here at the university. And what policy and governance? There we go. Is that okay? So I'm going to speak pretty briefly, and then Andini and I will have a brief discussion, and we're most excited to hear from you, your ideas, your questions, your criticisms. But when I think about leadership, the first thing I think about is people your age and even younger. You're the people that should define what kind of leaders we need, okay? Because for far too long in too many places in the world, It's been people who've been thinking about their past and the leaders we should have, as opposed to people about you who are going to chart and build the future. And so that's where I'd start. The world has changed dramatically over the last generation or two. You do not have to wait your turn, nor should you. The world needs you. Listen, there's so much progress that we've made as a worldwide community. Health, technology, education, but we've got a lot of challenges. And it's hard to argue that the people who've been in charge have universally done a tremendous job. We have left your generation with many challenges: income inequality, climate crisis, any number of issues. So that's where I'd start. When you think about leaders, do not think about somebody 70 years old that you may vote for or not. Think about yourselves. Think about what role you can play. Or think about the kind of people who will look at public policy issues and decisions based on where the world is going to be, not where it is or where it's been. It's so important. And obviously, I'm speaking to people who believe that because you're engaged in studies to better your communities, better your country, better the planet. But that is a gift and a skill for people to make decisions based on where the world, none of us know for sure, but where the world using data is likely to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. That's the only way we're going to make the kind of progress we need, not just to solve some of the challenges that threaten our planet, but also to allow people to thrive. I think a couple other principles on leadership would be, secondly, people who believe in data, who believe in facts. Listen, emotion's important. Sometimes we make progress on issues because something terrible happens in the world and we want to respond to it to make sure it doesn't happen again. But for the most part, we need to make decisions, even if they're infused with humanity and feeling and passion and good intentions based on data. Okay? I am a political progressive, the term we use in the United States. I believe in government. I believe investing in people. But I also believe that a progressive should be the first person to say, if a program is not working well because the data says it's not, to say we should stop investing in that program. Shouldn't be simply a fight of pro-government or anti-government. We need to be open to the facts. We also need to have people, and this is true for civil society. Most of what I'm going to talk today, leadership, of course, is business leaders, faith leaders, academic leaders. But I'm centering this mainly around civil society leaders and governmental leaders. We need people who also understand how people are living their lives from a technological standpoint, so that applications and user interfaces are as solid in government or in academia as they are in the private sector. Because the easiest way to build trust in government is for somebody to interact with government. Could be local, could be provincial, could be state, and they have a good experience. It was quick, it was easy to understand, it was painless. Leaders have to understand it's not just about the policy, it's how is it going to be implemented? What's the ecosystem around it? What's the user design? What's the user experience? And I think my experience in policy and politics too often has been, there's like a paper and it's really smart, and there might even be data, and that's good. But there's not enough thought to, like, you know, no company releases a product without thinking about what's the implementation, how are we going to measure it, what's the user experience, how are we going to iterate? And all too often, I think on the public policy side, we don't bring that same care. You need leaders who understand that these just aren't debates in halls. You're going to have to bring this to the marketplace, so to speak, to the people and how they interact with it. I believe that it's really important for leaders to inspire hope. I believe that the challenges this world faces are pretty profound. It can kind of bum you out. But we're up to them if we work collaboratively, if we're willing to not insist that we're always right and the other side's always wrong, if we're willing to listen to facts. But you've got to give people confidence that there is hope. to overcome a problem or to seize an opportunity. And so this is where leadership is, and of course, some leaders only deal with data. They're data leaders. Some leaders come up with policy. But leaders, particularly when they are trying to lead a country or a state or a city or an institution, they have to blend it all together. So you've got to inspire people that we can tackle a challenge. And here's how we're going to tackle a challenge. And here's why it's important. And who's going to benefit. Because I think, you know, your country is probably a little more hopeful than mine is right now. Our politics are really poisonous. It's hard some days to believe we're going to make progress on anything. We can't agree on facts. We can't agree on truth. But even in that toxic stew, you have to have leaders who say, despite all that, whether it's on climate change or income inequality or women's health care or infant mortality, we can pick the issue, that we can now. You also have to have leaders who will deal with the cynicism, because hopeful people today often get criticized for being naive, for not being strong enough. But without hope, what is there? That is what has defined the human journey. As challenging as it's been, as frustrating as it can be, as often as we make progress, then we have a setback. But generally, it's all been built, yes, on good ideas and good policy, but it's built on that foundation of hope. Barack Obama had a phrase, yes, we can. And it wasn't just about winning an election. It was about doing hard things together in a collaborative way. And I think that's so very important. I do think when it comes to collaboration, you know, in my country, we're a two-party political system. Someday that will change, but right now we're two-party. And if a member of one party says something positive about a member of another party, you know, they get lit up on social media. If they cooperate with someone from the other party on a policy issue, they get criticized because it is seen as tribal, right? There is one good side and there's one bad side. Not just bad, it's evil, okay? But you need leaders who are willing to take those arrows and move forward. What I think we need across every country in the world, I mean, democratic countries for sure, we need people who decide they're going to go into public service. That could be in a staff position, could be in a think tank. It could be they run for office themselves and don't see it as a career or a lifelong decision. They're simply there to do the most good they can for the most people for just a period of time. We have too many people who stay in public life for too long. By the way, I'm not saying they're all corrupt, they're not. I'm not saying they're not smart, they are. Most favorably, you say they lose their edge a little bit. But also, particularly if they're elected, they tend to want to stay there. I'm not sure why, by the way. They're not particularly great existences these days. But we need people who basically will work with the other side, whether that be a political party. I think it's really important. We've lost the art of, I may disagree with you about everything, but this one thing. And I will work with you on this one thing, even though I couldn't disagree with you more on everything else. That is a lost art. To find that piece of common ground, there's a term that we use in the United States called strange bedfellows, where people say, I can't believe you're working with that person on that issue. You disagree with them on everything else. You know, so in the US, we have a big problem with mass incarceration. We send way too many people to prison and they stay there for way too long, and it's disproportionately affects minorities. I spent a lot of time now working on that issue, and some of the people I work with are people that were my mortal enemy in politics. I wanted to decapitate them politically, okay? But we agree on this, so we're going to find a way to move forward. And so I think it's really important for leaders not to be stuck, to be very almost athletic about who they can work with to solve a problem. And that's going to be different people depending on the issues. But that's the only way you get collaboration. The other part of good leadership, I think this is true all around the world. The most well-meaning people may get something really important done. Could be a piece of legislation. It could be a new regulation. It could be a policy change that is going to help a lot of people. And they work really hard to get that done. They do good storytelling and narrative around that. They almost build like a campaign around it. And then they forget to continue the story. You have to report back to the public about why the important thing you did is working. And by the way, if it's not working in some places, to be honest about that, we tend not to narrate the important victories from a public policy standpoint after they're done. We just move on to the next thing. And you've got to spend some time reporting back to people, hopefully to say this is why it's working. And to do that, yes, on data, but also tell the human stories of people who are benefiting from that new idea or that change in policy. The other thing from a leadership standpoint, and I think here in Indonesia, this is less controversial, okay? In the United States, we have about 40% of our population does not believe in climate change. Now, you can't afford that, given your country and surrounded by water, but I think climate change is a global problem. And in truth, the countries that are going to suffer most are going to be lower income countries. And it was the upper income countries who contributed most of the problem, including my country. But we must insist on leaders globally, who of course admit that it's a problem, give you some hope that it can be solved, and invest in it. You know, my view on this is we are probably going to have to be saved by some technology that captures the carbon out of the air instead of doing the hard thing, which is to stop producing so much of it. But we should stop producing as much of it as we can in the near term, but invest in those solutions. But this is a global problem. So I think any of us that run into any leader in any country who doesn't have at the top of their agenda how to deal with climate change, we should all challenge them. This is where citizens come in. We have a role to hold leaders accountable and to challenge them and to press them and to insist that they, particularly for your generation, how many studies are out there right now where people who are 20, 25 say they are not going to have children because of climate change? Okay, a lot. And it's understandable. It's real to you in a way it's not real to me. You're going to have kids and grandkids dealing with refugee crises and all the economic disruption and obviously conditions that are no longer livable for the human species if we don't tackle this. So that's the only specific issue I wanted to call out, just because I think it is so important. And I do think the United States is the biggest offender in terms of having leaders who say it's not a problem, or say there's an easy fix, or say it's a choice. We can't do anything about climate change because it'll kill the economy. It's so dishonest because, of course, the next few decades, probably the most successful businesses, and there's already a lot of them, are going to be in the green energy space, in the alternative energy space, and ultimately in things like carbon capture. Last thing I say, and then I look forward to talking with Adini, is you're in this university, you're studying about governance and policies and issues. So you have already decided it's important to be involved in the debates and the question about what kind of country Indonesia is going to be and what kind of world. But I would just implore you, you've got friends and family members, I'm sure, who think, you know, politics and government, it's all silly, it's ugly, you know, maybe you don't like all the candidates, right? Certainly in America, and I would argue in a lot of parts of Western Europe, you're not super inspired by the way politics is being transacted to people in it. But I always have to remind young people in America, and this is important because this is your foundation. Everybody who gets a tax cut or their tax raised, everyone who gets a job or doesn't, everybody who has an opportunity for education or doesn't, every woman who gets equitable health care or doesn't, every war we fight or don't, everyone who dies in that war or doesn't. Yes, those are policy decisions, but at their core, They are electoral decisions. So in non-democratic countries, this is not the case, but in countries that decide who is going to have power and not, every decision that gets made, by the way, those decisions that echo through decades and generations, goes back to who we elect. You have to be involved in the political process. Now, I think a lot of you hopefully will run for office yourself or work in a campaign or get involved in a party, but you don't have to. You just have to be part of the process, even when it's uninspiring, even when you don't like the choices, even when you don't think it's going to matter. The people we elect, as you know, have enormous power to change the lives for better or for worse for hundreds of millions of people in their own country and then billions around the world. So just as you focus on the issues you care about, the policy work that you want to get involved in, don't forget that it all originates at the ballot box. They are not disconnected items. And so that's why we have to be involved in that. And by the way, sometimes the people you think should win elections will win, and often they will lose. That certainly happened to me. But this is how we decide who has the power, right? I often tell, again, we're a two-party system. I'm a member of the Democratic Party in the United States. And oftentimes when the Democratic Party has a bad election, you know, the Republican Party will do X, Y, or Z that we don't agree with. Now, I don't like that they're trying to do that, but my message to Democrats is, if you don't like it, win the fricking election. Okay? That's the answer. That's the response. Because when somebody wins an election, most of the time, they're not there to just occupy the office. Some are, most aren't. They try and do big things that they believe in. And so I just would encourage you, sometimes I have seen people engaged in public policy who will say, well, the elections, they're kind of a dirty business. I want to be in a conference room thinking about big economic policy. Well, you need to do that, but you have to understand that ultimately, the people who are going to decide that economic policy are decided at the ballot box. And that's just the way democracies work, for good or for bad. And I guess I'll end there. We have a worldwide struggle right now around democracy versus autocracy. You know, our country, not too long ago, came very close to ending our democracy. We're not out of the woods yet, but it's still an open question if the United States of America can remain a pure democracy, where the person who gets the most votes wins. All around the world. This week, there was big protests in Mexico around disbanding the election commission so that there's less independence around elections. Obviously, we're seeing some vote counting issues potentially in Nigeria. Big protests in Israel around changes to the judiciary. You know, you have an issue here where some want to go back to a closed party system where you're not voting for people, but you're voting for parties. We all have to be vigilant if you believe in democracy. And by the way, democracy has a lot of challenges. There's some days it's like, really? This should work better. But for me, it's certainly more preferable to the alternative, where people don't have a choice. We have to be vigilant, but particularly your generation, about protecting democracy. And when you see somebody, an elected official, a party, a think tank, bringing forward things that would lessen the power of the voter, of the citizen, to concentrate power amongst the ruling elite and take power away from citizens, it's incredibly challenging. And, you know, all you have to do is, you know, in any week, like, you know, The Economist, okay, the magazine, seems like every week there's 2 more stories about 2 different countries that are sliding further and further into autocracy. In fact, at this very moment, for the first time, I think, since before World War II, there are more pure autocracies in this world than there are pure democracies. So this is not isolated. There's a movement. I don't want to say it's coordinated in one place, but it is people, largely, you know, the wealthiest people in our society, the people who have power, who do not want to freely give it up Or they want to basically change elections, so voters still ostensibly have a choice, but it's harder to change. So I think that that is something from a leadership standpoint, we are not going to like the world we live in, even if your country remains a democracy, if 70 to 75% of the world are autocracy. It's going to really, at that point, the enterprise could be coming to a close. So that's the other thing we have to insist on both climate change and I think on democracy, that there be no compromise, that we have to stay steadfast on that. So thank you for your time today. I really look forward to your questions and discussion. And Andini, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, David. Saya undang buat teman-teman, Bapak Ibu sekalian, ketika kita berdiskusi, saya tahu ada alokasi waktu khusus sebenarnya for Q&A, but since, you know, it's siesta time, it's 2 p.m., so people either just finish their class or they finish their lunch, and I'm pretty sure this is the time where they just want to rest and not listening to, you know, information not related to them. But I promise you, this discussion, not only it will be insightful, it can be a bit juicy. It depends on your question and my question. Jadi kalau ingin ada yang bertanya, jangan sungkan, mohon acungkan tangannya, sebutkan namanya, kemudian afiliasinya dari mana, dan juga kalau bisa, saya inginnya sesuai dengan diskusi flow. Jadi jangan tiba-tiba berubah topiknya, supaya kita jaga semuanya topiknya jadi bermanfaat juga buat teman-teman semuanya dan Bapak Ibu sekalian. So okay, David, I'm just following up on your explanation earlier. You mentioned about data, but as a strategist, since we have like maybe future political strategists in the House, so what will be more important? Is it intuition or is it data? What are the percentage
Right.
of that?
Well, I think in government, you know, meaning when you're working in a ministry or you're working in a local government, it's mostly data. That's what's driving. I think when you're talking about elections and politics, it's got to be a blend. So data in politics has gotten incredibly sophisticated. Like in the United States, you know a lot about every voter. But you have to blend that with a sense of what is an emerging issue? How can I reach people emotionally? How can I show leadership? I mean, in most countries, by the way, legislative elections are a little bit different, but executive offices, president, prime minister, you know, a governor, you know, people, it's as much emotion as it is logic and data. It's like, do I basically want to have this person on my phone and on my television for the next 4 years? Do I like them? Do I trust them? Do I think they understand how I'm living my life, right? So I think it's got to be a blend. It's the art and science. And then, of course, you know, politics, particularly elections, you know, there's not that much political talent in the world. A lot of mediocrity, but you see it when you know it, right? And that's one thing I think we need more of is, I think in most democracies now, let's say there's 100 people that might be good political candidates and or public servants. I think 4 to 5% of people think about that as not. I understand that not everyone's going to think about it, but we need more people to say, I'm going to step out there. So, because I'm sure there's some political talent in this room. And if you decided to pursue, you could really capture people's imagination, because that's ultimately, that's where the hope comes in. You want to connect with people and say, I can do something positive for you, or I'm going to die trying. And here's why I believe that. And so I think it's a blend, Andini, of data and emotion. And that's where the magic happens. But you know, some of the biggest moments in American and then global history are not scripted. There's also just how do people respond to a moment of crisis or something unanticipated. And that's where, you know, you really have the character of someone tested, because that's when the real person comes out, when they're not all operating off a script or a speech or basically presenting themselves in a one-way mirror.
So you worked with President Obama before on his first campaign as a president. How do you choose the candidate that you want to work with? What are like the,
Right.
yeah,
Well,
Let's
honestly,
do-
when you're beginning your career, sometimes you don't have much of a choice. So you just got to,
did you believe that Obama is gonna be a great candidate?
well, yeah, so I believed he could be a great president. I wasn't sure he'd be a great candidate, and I certainly didn't think he was going to win. I mean, because when he ran, he was considered a huge underdog. You know, funny name. You know, he's black. He
Completely-
spent some time in Indonesia, which,
Right.
you know, Fox News went crazy about. So I think that was what it was so great about that campaign is none of us, including him in the beginning, did it because we thought, oh, this is going to be the next president. We just believed that he could be a great president. And we were all there because we believed in that. So I always describe the best political campaigns are filled with missionaries, not mercenaries. Now, a missionary without any skill, I have no tolerance for that. You want like smart missionaries. But if people are there because they think it's the best way to get the next job, it generally doesn't work. So I think we thought he had the qualities to be a very good president. And our country needed change and our party needed change. But it was a huge underdog effort, which is what made it fun.
So it was kind of far-fetched in the
Yes.
beginning,
Super far-fetched.
but then, so when you did it the first time, you don't think about, oh, I have to win this thing as a strategist. Isn't that the aim of being a political strategist? You
Well-
gotta win the game.
So I think, you know, in our country, we have, as I said, two-party system. And those two parties will have contests to decide who represents their party. So a lot of times, so that's what I was talking about. It was that first contest. So in the general election, which is the two parties against each other, yeah, then you've got to win if it's a competitive situation. So I would say in our primary, where Hillary Clinton was our main opponent, the moment we thought we could win, and I remember the day, it was February the 5th, 2008. Then it changed. Then it was like, you better not lose. But up until that point, it was like we were playing with a house money expression, right? It was like, we're just in this for all the right reasons, and it'll last a year, and we'll all go back to our lives, him included. So it turns out that was very healthy. I would say we felt a lot more pressure in the general election, particularly because we had the aftermath of the Iraq War happening. Well, we were still in the Iraq War, the financial crisis, like there was big things happening. And so you felt a lot of pressure to win. And so honestly, that was not as enjoyable. There's something enjoyable about having no net. You're just like, you know, you don't have the expectations. So, and then his second election, which was a re-election, a lot of pressure. We all felt. He put a lot of pressure on me. And so that was a lot less fun. It was in many respects more important for him to get reelected than elected the first time. So we all felt very gratified about that. But the unemployment rate was still above 7%. You know, racism against him became much more open. So we felt it was a race we had to win, but very different. One was like fun and like romantic. And the other one was gritty and like a knife fight in a booth. Yeah.
So basically, you're managing a person, you're managing a profile, right? And then Obama is not the only one. You had experiences before and
Yeah.
after. How do you manage someone's character that be like, you know, completely the opposite of you, right? And then definitely have different expectation, maybe. How do you manage that expectation and then just
Right.
manage the emotional?
It's very hard. I mean, so I've worked for, you know, dozens of candidates over the years. Obama and I are actually fairly similar, which made it easier in a way, just emotionally. But I've worked for other candidates very dissimilar. But I think you have to understand it is their campaign, right? So they've decided what office to run for. Hopefully they know why they're running. Hopefully they have some sense of what kind of campaign they want to run, and you're there to implement that. So it's always important to remember whose name is on the ballot. If you're a staffer, it's not your name, it's their name. Now, it doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, they make plenty. And I think the most important thing for a campaign staffer and a candidate is to be authentic to them. So many campaigns will have like 5 different slogans. or 4 different strategies, or the candidate will start dressing differently, or it's like that never works. Like voters smell that I be authentic, but candidates, any leader needs people around them who will tell them the truth.
So not a yes man, yes sir
No,
type of people.
they can have some of those. And as people get more power, there tends to be less people who will challenge them. So there's a very old American artist named Frank Sinatra, right? He's got a song called My Way. And it's got a really important line in the song, which is to be someone who will say the things he truly feels and not the words of one who kneels. And leaders need people to say, you're making a mistake. You're wrong about this. Now, that generally shouldn't just be your opinion. It should have data or history, and you have to pick your battles. If every day you tell someone they're making a huge mistake, they're not going to listen to you. It's got to be on the big things, right? And so listen, I helped Obama before he was president when he ran for legislative. I have a very long history with him, right? And we generally got along famously and still do, and now we're friends, not, sort of business partners. But, yeah, we had some moments that were super challenging on both ends. Because there was plenty of times he said, what are you doing to me? So you have to have that kind of trust. Now, you generally don't want to do that in front of 50 people. You also have to know when to have that conversation. But I think you have to treasure someone's authenticity. You got to let them be themselves, strengths and weaknesses, because nobody's got all strengths. Build a campaign around them. And then I think the other thing, this is true for most leaders, not just in politics. You need leaders who are comfortable delegating. Because a good leader, if everything has to go to them, decisions will be too slow, things will pile up. So the only reason they're going to trust you to delegate is if you build a team that they're comfortable with, they're not worried about leaks, they think you run good process, and then hopefully they delegate. Because you want a leader, particularly at a presidential level, to be thinking about big things. Not the 17 things every day that a staff should deal with. And so I think that that's important. And the best organizations get that right? Which is, what does the leader worry about? Where do they have to be involved in the decision? And where are they comfortable letting the team execute? And every leader and organization is slightly different in terms of what makes that up. But to me, that is critical. But I have seen plenty of organizations where everything goes up to the leader. And that's super dispiriting for people. Things are slow, decisions don't get made. The leader may call 7 people who don't know what they're talking about an issue and say, hey, I talked to so-and-so and they think we should do this. But you got experts who say the alternative. Super frustrating. So that's the other thing, is you want to work for people who trust you. This is not just about serving them. Now, maybe your first job, you got to work for whoever. But your second job, your third job, pay a lot of attention to the type of person that is. I also think leaders, listen, there are famous leaders around the world who yell and scream and are mean and have done remarkable things. But I think for the most part, you want to work for leaders who are calm. Doesn't mean that they're not intense, but they don't sweat the small things. They're pretty even-tempered. Like Barack Obama, I never had to worry if he was going to be in a bad mood and somehow he would make a bad decision. That's just not how we roll. We just, here's a problem. What are we going to do about it? And that's what you really need. And that sounds, I'm sure for you, well, of course, that's how it should work. Trust me. You're going to get out in the world and you're going to see it doesn't always work that way. That's the theory and practice combination that you need to learn.
Does he swear though?
Yeah.
That's all I need to know. So he's human. So, okay.
Yes.
Siapa di
And he
sini?
used to smoke a lot.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that we know, right? Then he
His
stopped.
wife was very unhappy with that. That's what finally got him to stop. Yes.
Find a wife or a girlfriend who doesn't like you to smoke. This is unhealthy. Oke, siapa di sini yang tertarik untuk terjun ke dunia politik? Mungkin ingin jadi relawan dari nanti pas ketika pemilu, ada nggak? I'm asking who wants to volunteer in a political campaign. Only one or two?
Come on,
Three?
get your hands up,
Oh,
guys.
4. Okay, only 4 out of like this many individuals. Ayo anak Indonesia, 2 lagi. Okay. So there are a few. Okay, who here wants to be involved in presidential campaign?
Wow.
Gonna be very specific. Presidential campaign. Siapapun presidennya. Whoever the presidential candidate may be. Nobody wants to be involved? Only one? Okay, you can get coffee for the presidential candidate. It's only you. Gak ada? Okay, siapa di sini yang pengen jadi strategist? Political strategist or part of the team? Jadi bagian yang menggodok itu. Oh my God, kalian tahu gak sih kita mau ada pemilu bentar lagi? Please, I hope you guys know. Okay, I guess they're all the young voters. They're the new voters. Baru siapa yang baru akan memilih 2024? See, they're
Okay.
all the young voters, the majority of young voters. So they're probably still pretty much learning about how election works. So speaking of election, and then you mentioned authenticity, which is interesting because I remember vividly what Michelle Obama during one of the speeches, I think it was the last speech on the last push 2016 campaign. She was saying, when they go low, we go high. But apparently David, the low won. And then it became a trend, and it's sort of like echoing in some parts of the world. So how do you see this authenticity plays out though, if you become your real you and it sells apparently?
Well, sure. I mean, Donald Trump was authentically low. There's no question about that. So, but I still believe that over the long arc of history, hope will beat fear. Inspiration will beat dejection. Now, that doesn't mean you don't fight. You know, Michelle Obama was right. That should be, I think, our instinct and not to chase people in the gutter. But you've also got to fight ferociously for what you believe in. And that could be to disagree with your opponent. If they have character problems, to be clear about those, or ethics problems. But I think that I still think that as rough as politics can be, and as it is, you have got to speak to people's better instincts, not as in the entirety of your campaign, but important. And if I will, listen, I saw it sounds like a lot of you, you're going to vote, right? And I understand volunteering is not for everybody, campaign work. But the best policy people I've met in the world, they understand the electoral process too. Because they understand voters and they understand promises that candidates make and how voters respond to issues. So I would just encourage you, even if you're thinking like, I'm going to spend all my time working on economic policy or trade policy or defense policy. That's awesome. But don't think politics and campaigns are beneath you. The other thing I'd say is a lot of people who end up getting jobs in government offices have worked on a campaign. So that's how you meet people. So just remember that.
Jadi jangan nggak ada yang tunjuk tangan lagi kalau misalnya ditanya mau jadi bantuin nggak kampanye, because that's a once in a lifetime experience. You never know. That's the next election will be older, right? Right. Okay. Sekarang saya mau buka kesempatan kalau ada yang ingin bertanya, comment or anything, silakan. Boleh. Namanya siapa? Masnya? Coba suaranya lebih lantang aja. Okay. Are you gonna speak bahasa Indonesia or in English?
Oke, nama saya, my name is Fahri Novendra, and I am from Singapore Bangsa University of Karawang. I am not a student of University of Indonesia. First of all, I want to say sorry because my English wasn't perfect. Yeah, and second, I admire of a Democratic Party in the States, and because Democratic Party was a progressive party in the States, and we don't have that party like Democratic Party in Indonesia. We are developed from the conservative way to progressive way, and that's good, I think. But I want to ask about for Mr. David, you are campaign manager of President Obama in the first election, right? And
Pertanyaannya,
yeah, how to ensure people of the stage to vote Obama? Because I remember that 2008, there is financial crisis in the United States. So how President Obama can ensure people of United States to vote them with a plan to his plan to survive United States from apa namanya a financial crisis.
very well.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Fahri.
Well, it's a great question. So, American elections are way too long, right? I think systems where the elections are like a month or two are much better. But our election was 2 years. And so in those 2 years, which seemed like 200 years, the most important issue at the very beginning was the Iraq War. Remained important, but then the financial crisis happened. And so when Obama started running in the beginning of 07, you know, the economy was pretty strong. There were starting to be some cracks in the housing market, but started out with voters saying they're very unhappy about the Iraq War, but they were pretty happy about the economy. By the end of the campaign, you know, people were as panicked about the economy as people have been in our country since the 1930s, since the Great Depression. So the challenge for Obama was he was this young, relatively inexperienced candidate, and voters had to make a decision about who would handle this enormous crisis. And we were running against someone named Senator John McCain, very popular, had been around for a long time. But so we weren't going to win that question on number of years in government or age or number of bills introduced. It was about the image you gave about how you would handle crisis. And during that, let's say, month, and listen, people pay attention to presidential elections in most countries. You know, America is no different. Everybody's watching, particularly that year. Everyone's panicked. They're losing jobs. They're losing their house. The stock market's going down. It's like, which of these two candidates can I trust? And it was, some of it was policy. What were you going to do? But a lot of it was your demeanor. Did you seem confident? Did you seem like you would make good decisions? And Obama won that. You know, we had 3 presidential debates during that, and most of those debates were about how are you going to handle the financial crisis? And Obama, the young Black candidate, came across as more steady than the older white experienced candidate. And so a lot of voters, by the way, a lot of voters who, you know, they struggled with his race, but they thought, listen, this is a big situation and I kind of trust him. It was also the newness, because people were like, hey, we need something big, different, because things aren't working here. You know, we have the Iraq War, we have a financial crisis, things are a mess. So that campaign in the last 60 days for us really was 90% about the financial crisis. And of course, the reason he won re-election in 2012, even though the economy was still weak, was it was beginning to recover. And voters gave him credit for doing tough things to help the economy, even though they were deeply unpopular at the time. So one example, I would say the industry in America that is most romanticized is the American car industry, automotive industry. And it came this close to disappearing. So the government had to provide a lot of assistance to them. Even though it was the American automotive industry, this was in the beginning of 2009, 15% of Americans supported that. That's it. Now, 3 years later, about 80% did, because it worked out. So there is a lesson there for politicians that sometimes you do the right thing and you don't get rewarded for it. You should still do the right thing. But you can't make decisions based on short-term polls. And I love that story because he was rewarded electorally 3 years later for doing something most of the country opposed. And, you know, that was, and, you know, our election in 2024, you have one beginning of 24, we have one later in 24. You know, it looks like we're going to have a pretty tough economy. So the economy, again, listen, the economy is always the biggest issue in almost every election. But particularly when you're in a recession or that kind of situation, it drives politics. So it was a fascinating thing to go through, though, because if you had told us at the beginning of the campaign by the end of the campaign, you both would have won, and you will be entering the presidency with a historical financial crisis. We wouldn't have believed anybody, right? But that's, that's the way it unfolded.
Right, but also I'll just like to follow up on that because I remember the young voters' participation during that period. Like they all got excited, choosing that newness that America, I guess, longing at that time during that grim period of the Great Recession, right? And then we're about to enter our election, which is kind of like finding the new candidate, literally,
Yeah.
right? So what would you suggest, I guess, for our presidential candidate or the people behind it to get the young people excited? Because as we saw earlier, nobody really raised hands in terms of like, do we want to participate in
Right.
election or whatever? It's like, yeah, they have like a very low expectation in that sense.
Well, I'd say the first thing is they have to listen to young voters. What do you care about? What are you concerned about? What are you hopeful about? And not assume some clever TikTok is going to somehow turn you into excited people, right? And if you want the support of young voters, you have to put it at the core of your strategy. You've got to listen, you've got to invest, you've got to hire a lot of young people, and you've got to inspire people. So I think what's interesting, you have high voter turnout in Indonesia, higher than we have in the US. But there's two questions with young people generally. A, are they going to vote? In your country, more young people are going to vote election to election than in my country. In my country, we can have very big changes, election to election, with young people under 25. Then the second question is, are they going to get involved? And that is what campaigns need to aspire for, is not just to get the vote of you, that's great, better than not, your involvement, right? So people get inspired. And then the winning candidate hires a lot of you to come work in their administration. That's what we did. The Obama administration was filled with these young, idealistic, bright people. And it was such a pleasure to go to work next to them every day. I was younger back then, maybe not young, younger. But it was great to see. So that's the question. I think in a lot of time in politics, because old people make up more of the electorate, although here in Indonesia, I think over half the electorate is under 35. In America, it's nowhere near that. So important voting bloc, but I think still a lot of candidates will think about like the 55-year-old, small business owner, and that's important. But you really got to think about the aspirations of young people. The other thing I'd say about young voters, if young voters get excited and get involved, it gets their parents excited, their aunts and uncles excited, their grandparents excited. So many of the people who voted for Barack Obama, including a lot of people who would say, I can't believe I'm voting for Barack Hussein Obama. They did it because their kids got them to do it. They're like, my kid's really excited, and I'm going to give this a try. So I think sometimes politicians and candidates don't understand that echo effect that can happen, because, I have kids now, not quite your age, a little younger, but anytime they get excited about anything, outside of their own headspace, I get super excited, right? And you want to learn more about it. So I think that's an important, dynamic.
So without realizing it, you guys are actually influencers in your own family
All of you.
or impactors. Right? Ada yang ingin bertanya lagi? Oke, yang perempuan, silakan. Mbaknya, namanya siapa dan afiliasinya? Silakan.
Okay, thank you so much for your great explanation, and thank you for the opportunity. Hello everyone, my name is Indra Huyani. I'm from public administration in Indonesia. What do you think is the most critical factor enabling collaborative leadership to meet a changing world? Thank you.
We're talking Indonesian aspect.
Yes.
Well, I think, so first of all, any leader has to understand that people are living their lives right today. So they need help and assistance today. But as I mentioned, good leaders think about where the world's going. So in less than 30 years, Indonesia is going to be one of the most powerful economies in the world. Your population's growing. By the way, a lot of the so-called economic powers in the world today, their population is declining. Okay? Your population is booming. You've got a thriving tech sector. You still are a democracy. Make sure that continues, by the way. So I think it really is important to any country now to say, how do I lift more people economically? So people can get out of poverty. So people who are lower income can become middle income. Education is a big part of that. Job training is a big part of that. I think a big part of any leader now is to understand which jobs cannot be replaced by AI or automation and invest in those jobs, right? Because the world is going to change many times over the next 10 or 20 years. A lot of the jobs today that are booming may disappear in certain industries or be threatened. So what are the industries, the sectors, the economies that are going to be resilient? Tourism is always going to be resilient, but you have to have a lot more than that. So I just think that you've got to have an eye in Indonesia, my humble opinion, to obviously the state of affairs today, because again, somebody's only 21 once, they're only going to school once, they're only getting their first job once, so you want to make sure that's as good as possible, but with an eye toward what needs to get built so that Indonesia, I mean, if you think of around the world, which of the countries, I mean, you guys will be leading them. I hope you lead soon, but you'll have families leading in 2050. What are the countries that have the potential to rewrite the history of the world? It's here, it's Nigeria, it's certainly India. And so it's exciting to be in Indonesia, I think, right now. I think you also have to figure out, certainly from a leadership standpoint, what are the different challenges and scenarios around climate change, right? Like, what are the worst case scenarios? What are the best case scenarios? Are there anything we can do to get more to the best case scenario? I think a lot of times in government, people don't do enough of that. They just like, here's the thing we're going to do. Like, well, let's plan. Any good business has like best case, worst case, crisis case, medium case, and you operationalize off that. And I think that's important for governmental leaders. But I think this is a special time for Indonesia just because you have so many strengths and assets that if properly capitalized in a thoughtful way, could really make it an exciting century.
Speaking of Indonesia, you mentioned a bit about the we're going to have either the open or closed proportional election system. And perhaps since like they're the new voters here, I guess they were not aware of how important it is for them as a voter if we do have either open or closed proportional system. So maybe you can also share what is actually good in this base case scenario, looking at our current situation and the opportunities that we have.
It's a great question. So my understanding is here in Indonesia, there used to be a closed system, which means you basically had to vote for a party and then all the candidates in that party. So you didn't vote for individuals. Now you can vote for individuals. And you, it's not a democracy if you don't give people full choice, right? Particularly, I think young people, they don't necessarily want to vote for candidates of just one party. Like, okay, I like what this person says on this issue in this party. I like this person. So this is a big thing. And my understanding your Supreme Court is looking at this question. But in my humble opinion, I'm not a voter here, this would be a huge backtrack for democracy here. If you remove the ability for people to pick people, if people just pick parties, in our country, not nationally, but in many of our states, wasn't too long ago that we had closed systems too. You voted straight ticket. And that's one of the ways you get a lack of collaboration because people aren't even open to the possibility of choosing an individual in a party they might not always agree for. And so this is a big question here. My sincere hope is it gets decided properly. If you go to a closed system, to me, that is a huge, huge setback because think about it. How depressing would it be if you couldn't vote for the candidate you most liked? Or because you want to diversify, perhaps. Some of you may vote for one party, a lot of you probably don't.
Ada yang ngikutin nggak di sini soal isu proporsional terbuka dan tertutup? Ngikutin ya. Ini buat teman-teman yang baru akan memilih nanti, lebih baik memilih kandidat atau memilih langsung partai politiknya? Yeah, they choose to vote for the candidate.
Yeah, so that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the discussion. Ada yang ingin bertanya lagi? Saya lihat tadi ada yang Oke, saya pilih yang di tengah sini, masnya maju ke depan aja, saya kasih mic-nya. Namanya siapa dan dari mana? Namanya siapa? Ibnu dari? Okay, so Ibnu is from Political Science
Uh-oh.
University of Indonesia. Get straight with the question.
I'm sorry because the contact is quite long. Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Flav. It's such an honor to have you here today. My name is Ibnu. I am a final year political science student. We will be holding our presidential elections on next year's Valentine's Day. And I would argue that the last two elections, 2014 and 2019, have been polarizing to the point where families breaking apart due to political preference. But the funny thing is, in Indonesia, the candidates who were running for president in 2019 is now currently in the cabinet. For context, Mr. Plum, imagine Obama won against McCain at the 2008 presidential election. But during Obama's administration, McCain is the Secretary of Defense. Imagine, that's so funny. With that said, I am curious about your take on the role of leaders to educate people that politics, especially election, is not a zero-sum game. What would you suggest to aspiring political strategists who may work with candidates next year to craft, let's say, quote unquote, healthy campaign? Thank you.
Thank you, Ibnu.
Well, I mean, it's super challenging. I think, so, your system, most system, our system's somewhat unique. Two parties, not parliamentary, like, you have to build coalitions, and that tends to bring people who just fought against each other in the government together. Now, I will say Barack Obama brought Hillary Clinton into his cabinet. So same party, but we had a fierce battle, right? So first of all, I think leaders have to be willing to reach out to people that might have been their opponent. Number one. Number two, it's important not to malign, to criticize everyone in a party you may not agree with, right? So like our current president, Joe Biden, does a pretty good job of this. When he criticizes Republicans, he won't criticize all Republicans. He'll say some Republicans or certain Republicans or that Republican, because you want to keep a bridge open to the other side and say, we're not maligning everybody. But it's challenging because I think with social media today, with, in our country, we have something called Fox News, which, really treats the Democratic Party as Satan, okay? Pedophiles, drink kids' blood, like it's crazy. So, but I think it's up to leaders to basically keep a bridge there to the other side and to be careful about how you describe your opponents. We can disagree without saying someone's a traitor to our country, right? We can have fierce policy debates without saying someone is a bad person. I'll give you an example. In America, when we have debates, not president, every office has a debate. So let's say from a local mayor of a city or legislator. One of the questions those candidates often get asked by the media is, okay, you've just beaten each other up for 90 minutes. Andini, can you say something nice about your opponent? And it used to be well, you're a good father, or, you had a good idea 5 years ago, or you ran a good business. Now, a lot of those candidates won't do it because they'll get criticized by their political base for saying anything nice. It's so toxic. I think that's probably unique to America. I hope it doesn't come here. So I just think it's important for leaders to have some boundaries where they don't take a flamethrower to everything. And to be careful about how you criticize your opponents. Because I think when you say someone hates the country, someone's going to destroy the economy, someone is going to, basically hand the country over to terrorists, it's really hard then to cooperate with that person on something else. You've got to leave space. Because in most systems, you're not going to get everything done just with your party. You need some cooperation. And so it's such a great question. I mean, I will tell you, I'm somewhat negative about this in the United States right now. Because Like right now, if you want to win the Republican nomination for president, which is going to happen over the next year, you basically have to say the following thing. Donald Trump had the election stolen from him. COVID wasn't a real crisis. Kids should not learn about slavery in American history. We basically should target trans kids and even gays and lesbians now. Like women, I mean, we now have outlawed abortion in half of our country. I know that's controversial in some parts of the world. In our country, it's been legal for a long time. So, because that's what it's required, okay? What's so toxic about this is a lot of the people who peddle this hate don't believe it. So, Fox News is such a powerful part of American politics. It's a megaphone. And there's a court case about the 2020 election and Fox's role in attacking the credibility of it. And what just came out this week in legal discovery are all the text messages and all the emails from the executives and talent on Fox News. Basically, they didn't believe any of what Trump was saying. But they said we had to talk about it because that's what his voters believe. Okay? So I have more confidence here in Indonesia and many countries, quite frankly, than I do in America, where it's almost a business to divide. It is a business to hate. It is a business to lie about your political opposition. So don't do that here. You've got to retain some ability to work with people that you disagree with on a lot of things. Now, I would say in America, at the local level, it's not that bad. At the local level, you still have more ability to be honest and cooperate and not hate as much. But it's pretty nasty right now. And I think that's true in places in Western Europe as well.
So speaking of Fox News, we also had that experience 2014 in Indonesia, where mainstream media become partisan media. So question is, how do you see the role of mainstream media in election, and also the role of social media is also getting wild in the social media, right? So is it still relevant, and how can we make use of it better as voters?
Well, first, I think, the role of journalism and independent journalists has never been more important in the history of the world. And a lot of journalists are putting themselves in danger, not just going to war zones. You have journalists who are attacked, even killed, who certainly are stalked, threatened online, just because they're reporting facts that certain people don't agree with. So we should treasure journalism and journalists. I think we all have a role to play on social media, though, to share with our networks facts and truth. I mean, I'm sure I'm not alone. I have members of my family who regularly will post something or send something that's just completely crazy. And I'm not saying something I disagree with, just completely crazy. Okay? COVID causes heart problems or whatever. So you have to say, I will take time to find something, hopefully from a source they trust, and say, listen, will you just read this? Like, it's hard. We all have a job to kind of be arbiters of truth and to share that in our own way. So that's an extra burden on our time. We have to do it because otherwise the peddlers of hatred and mistruth win. But most people get their information not directly from news sources today. Of course, they get it through social media. Some of that is legitimate journalistic outlets. A lot of it's people pretending to be journalistic outlets. And people don't really make a distinction between the New York Times and the Epoch Times. We have something called the Epoch Times in the United States, which is a massively, massively powerful platform. You've probably never heard of it. That's an engine on Facebook, and it's how so many people get their information, and it's completely fabricated information. It's so powerful. So you got to fight back. Like, listen, being a citizen, both of your country and the world, I think is both a privilege, but it's also really hard because nobody can take a moment off for being a citizen. You got to be in the fight. And that's asking a lot of people. But when enough citizens decide they're too tired or too fatigued or don't have time to, by the way, fight for their enterprise, that's when the people who want to fill the vacuum with something more dangerous are able to do it. You only have to read, I just finished another book about the pre-World War II period in Germany, you know, and it was happening in front of the entire country. Okay.
Alright. Ada yang ingin bertanya lagi? Oke, saya ngambil dari sini ya. Tapi sebelumnya mohon cewek-cewek yang di atas itu suaranya kayak dikecilin dikit dulu. Ya, karena rempongnya kedengeran, Nek. Coba yang sebelah sini, Mbaknya yang di atas ya. Silakan. Namanya kemudian dari mana? The question.
Good afternoon. My name is Fitria. I'm from public administration. And I want to ask about how the role of policy analysts to support their leader in achieving their vision. Thank you.
Well, that's a great question. So I think the most functioning democracies and governments are staffed almost entirely with policy analysts. That's what you should do. So, you know, if you're working for a minister or a local elected official, you know, let's say we have to come up with a new solution on transportation or new zoning around housing, or, you know, should we build a new hospital or not? Like, they're going to go to the staff, but then the staff, of course, and they have access to public policy experts from academia, from the private sector. So the policy analyst is really there to support the principal, whether they're elected or not, write memos for them, provide research for them, ultimately provide them recommendations. You know, some leaders like you to simply say, here's the 3 choices, you decide. Some leaders will want you to say, which one would you decide? Doesn't mean they'll always agree with you, but you know, I tend to like those leaders because they want to know what their people think. But the great thing about being a policy analyst is you have obviously access to data and studies and other locations that have tried what you want to do, and you learn from that, but you also have the ability to tap into outside expertise. So I think that that's some of the most enriching work in the world. And by the way, you don't have to make a career of it. You can, that would be great. But you go do it for 2 or 4 years, you'll always look back at the work you did and the lives it helped improve and change as some of the best work you ever did. So it's a great question. So in the right situation, it's incredibly rewarding. Now, again, your first job, you just got to get your job. But if you're policy analyst, the second and third job, you really want to work for someone who will trust their staff's opinion, who's hungry for a different point of view, who wants you to talk to a lot of people, even people who may not agree with you politically. You know, if it's just a policy issue. So that can be really exciting.
Oke, yang laki-laki silakan yang udah nunjuk tangan dari tadi. Boleh. Namanya siapa?
Hello, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Arya. I'm from majoring system administration. I have this one in common. I want to ask you something that does leadership comes by its own, or anyone can step up and just practice in their way to be a leader? And I have a second question. What kind of cigar that Barack Obama used in? Thank you.
Well, he's not a cigar smoker. He smoked Newport cigarettes. Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. So, well, yeah, I'll say it. So in 2007, by the way, it's getting long enough, I forget a lot of these things, but I remember this. So he had told his wife he would stop smoking. And we were down in a debate in South Carolina, in the southern part of our country. And before the debate, we're at like this, not a hotel, like a motel, super cheap, like $20 US, because, you know, campaigns have to be cheap, you know. And we had 2 rooms because we were doing some practice. And so it was like 3 of us in with him and his wife. And we had a second room, and he went into the second room. And like we walked out on the balcony because it was one of these motels with the doors facing outside. And it was like smoke coming out. We're like, dude, like if she walks out here and sees the smoke, they're like in big trouble. What are you doing? So smart guy, but not about everything. Okay. Listen, I think true, historic, meaningful leaders, you can't teach them. They have something about motivating people, about leading people, about inspiring people. But anybody who's a leader can learn best practices around hiring, around measuring, around inspiring, around the right amount of delegation or not. So the great thing is there's so much coaching so much literature that you can learn from. I think anybody who leads that doesn't constantly try and educate themselves about how it can be a good leader. The most important thing about leadership, by the way, is I think 360 reviews from your team. So you get honest feedback about what's working and what's not working. A lot of leaders don't like that, by the way, but it's really important to have that culture. But I think historic leaders, I mean, they're at a level already that they can work on it to get better, but they have something that, you know, a lot of us don't have. I mean, they just have that ability to have people. It's hard to get people to imagine a future that currently doesn't exist, but they can do that. And by the way, that's not just in politics, that's in business. Some of the most legendary business leaders have what it takes. Those types of leaders, by the way, also tend to be really resilient. You're not remembered historically for doing something everybody assumed was easy to do. You challenge orthodoxy, you create new markets, you create new products, you bring new policy. Like that's what I think tends to be innate to somebody. But then they need to grow. Now, what I have seen, because I do most of my work in the private sector now, and I've done that for the last 10 years, is some of the best entrepreneurs, like there's few people on the planet that could have imagined that product or service, much less built it. But then when you get more established, they really struggle with leadership in a more bureaucratic moment. And so they tend to need a lot of help around systems, around HR, around delegation. And a lot of those leaders struggle with that because they're built differently. They are entrepreneurs. They want to move fast. You know, they don't want any layers. They don't want a lot of systems. But at some point, an organization gets big enough that without systems, it will break.
Who would you think is like, for you personally, aspiring business leader from your experience?
Well, I used to say Elon Musk, not so much anymore. Although I admire a lot of what he's done, but I don't like the current trajectory that he's on. But it's always amazing to me when it's hard enough for somebody to like master one field, particularly if it's innovative, but they then do it 2 and 3 times. Not a big fan necessarily of today. You know, I admire a lot of the leaders who are working in the climate space right now on some of the moonshot technologies. Now, it infuriates me that it may come to that. Like we as a planet should have been able to stop putting carbon dioxide in emissions. But we may have no choice but to have the kind of technology that captures and stores that carbon in a way that's economical. So the people I meet who are running these companies that are small right now, but are beginning to get proof of concept, to me are exciting. I mean, they're saviors in a way. And so to me, those are the most exciting. Now, they all hope those are successful businesses. You know, I think a lot of times, certainly in America, in Silicon Valley, sometimes you'll meet people and they're like, well, I'm here to change the world. Well, maybe, but you're also working in a business. So let's not confuse the two. So most of those leaders want to build successful businesses, but they're very mission driven. And so those are the people that inspire me most today. And then a lot of the people I meet who are working on really some of the innovations in healthcare around precision medicine, around mapping the human cell, you know, those are going to produce great outcomes. And those are really inspiring. I don't understand half of what they're talking about, but when they put it in plain language, it's so inspiring. Like the next 20 or 30 years, some of the breakthroughs in healthcare are going to be so tremendous. And they're done by these heroic people. We probably won't know their names, but they believe they're on the verge of discovery. And that is really exciting.
Innovators. Ada lagi yang ingin bertanya? Silakan, Mbaknya. Boleh? Langsung saja. Namanya siapa? Kemudian dari mana? Silakan, Mas, dikasih. Langsung ke pertanyaannya ya.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatia. So I have 2 questions. The first one is the pandemic become a critical moment either for private and also public sectors. So how's the pandemic affecting the way of leadership roles in the new adaptive era? And the second one is in Indonesia, we know musyawarah mufakat. It's a concept that rather than we just vote, we discuss what best for us in decision making. And we also know in the USA the system, there use vote as a decision making way and a conflict situation. So my question is, how to bridge the good part of the minority opinion who lost the vote into the program to win the. Thank you.
You mean how to involve the minority or the side that lost the debate into
How
the
to
program?
bring our good idea
Oh,
for the minority opinion into the program of the majority one.
I guess how to be inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the pandemic, this gets to the point I made at the beginning about good leaders understand where the world's going, right? So any good government right now, and your country handled the pandemic very responsibly. But any good government got plans and resources around the next one. Because odds are it's not going to be another 100 years before the next global pandemic. There's already a lot of concern about the avian flu strain right now because it's starting to migrate to mammals, animals, not humans, right? None of us want to think about another virus, different virus, but a government has to have a plan, right? That doesn't mean you need to go out there and talk about it every day to your public, but you have to have a plan. And I worry in a lot of parts of the world, your country is probably better than most. There's like relief that, okay, we may be towards the end of COVID and people don't want to sit and say, let's do the hard work to be better prepared for the next one, right? I mean, the devastation of this pandemic is obviously, we don't begin to understand. We understand the death and the illness and the economic disruption, but the social and mental health and educational effects of this we'll be studying for decades. So I think the most important thing is for every government to say, can we be better prepared for the next one than we were for this one? And I can tell you with great certainty in the United States, we are not yet. So, your question about minority, when a party wins, it goes such a long way to first say, listen, you might not have voted for me, but I'm going to do my best to represent you, so rhetoric. But then to work with a minority party to say, hey, I'm going to do this thing. Could be economic, could be healthcare, could be education, could be transportation. That maybe the minority party doesn't agree with the bulk of it. But do you have a couple of ideas? I'd be happy to consider them and include them in the package. It's such an easy thing to do. And so I think, the important thing when you win is to somehow not be a gloating, arrogant winner. To be gracious and to find ways to work with the other side. That's a little bit easier in your system than ours, but it's important. It's such a good question. But again, that comes down to the human part of it. Like, is a leader willing to operate in that way? To say, okay, let's have a meeting. I'm going to change our tax code, or I've got some new investments I want to make in energy or education. Let me see your ideas. As opposed to saying, I won, screw you, I'm doing it my way. Even if most of what you do is your way. Like, it's not that hard to put out an olive branch and listen. And what I have always found in politics, in government, in the private sector, a lot of times you think the people who are your opposition, your competition, sometimes it's your enemy. You can think everything they think is wrong and everything they think is doing is dumb. It's like, I don't know. They think it's smart. Why don't you spend a little time understanding what they think? You have a better understanding. So I think it's that simple respect, but listening to the other side.
Oke, kita masih ada waktu atau enggak untuk durasi bagaimana teman-teman? Kita harus berhenti di mana? I have to check the duration. Harus berhenti di jam berapa? In 30 minutes or 40 minutes? Berapa menit? 20 menit. So we have 20 minutes to go. Oke. Masih ada yang ingin bertanya tadi saya lihat di tengah, silakan masing ya yang pakai kemeja biru. Yang pakai kemeja biru boleh dikasih mikrofonnya? Silakan sebutkan nama, dari mana, dan juga pertanyaannya langsung.
Hello, good afternoon, Mr. Clark. My name is Arfirnan from Business Administration. I have a question about healthcare, especially I see in the States that healthcare, I'm sorry, but very inefficient because you spend like 14 or 15% of your GDP towards healthcare. And then I want you to explain like how the dynamic of healthcare, especially from the political perspective, and how we in Indonesia could learn, and especially I wish for, so we don't go to the same hole that you've gone.
What's your name again?
Firnan.
Firna.
Yeah.
So basically what Firna is asking you, how on earth the most developed nation, the leader of democracy in the world, do not have a universal healthcare that reaches its population? So, and then how can we avoid that direction?
Well, we don't have universal health care, yet we still spend 15% of our GDP to not cover everybody. So there's so much that goes into it. You know, I think most of our debate in America tends to be around coverage. How many people are going to cover? This is the problem of not having universal coverage, as opposed to spending as much time on how do we get costs down. So, you know, for the first time, our government is going to be able to negotiate prescription drug prices on behalf of its citizens who get government health care. In America, the people who get government health care, people over 65, can get it if they want it. And, you know, people below a certain income level. Those are the two factions that get government health care. That's it. Everything else is employer, or you pay for it as an individual. So now the government for the first time can negotiate, because our drug prices, you know, let's just compare it to our neighbors, Canada and Mexico. For some drugs, we pay 10, 15, 20 times more. So that's going to stop. That's good. I think we clearly spend a lot more money for end of life care than most countries. So that's always a hard discussion, but you have to have it. You know, some large percentage of our healthcare is spent in the last month or two of someone's life. We don't have the hard conversations really about that. I'm not saying sometimes we shouldn't do that, but you know, yeah, I think you also have, you know, the measurement around it. You know, we measure health outcomes really from how many people have coverage, you know, what the cancer remission rate is, all those very important, but we don't spend as much time on the bang for the buck, so to speak, as we say in the US. Like, what are we getting for the dollars that we're spending? The other thing is consumers themselves of healthcare are not aware really of how much stuff costs. It's this very opaque system. Like, I think every consumer in America, every time they have an interaction with any part of the healthcare system, should see what it costs, even if insurance is covering it, so that we all make different decisions about that potentially. You know, we definitely, you know, things like MRIs, we overprescribe those, very expensive, as you know. There's incentive both for the provider and the insurance company in that, right? So I think on the insurance company side, it's very profit driven. So it's a mess. It's a mess. And it's kind of a patchwork based on employer-based healthcare. So Obama's big healthcare reform added a lot more people to get covered. And now as an individual, and that's important because a lot of people now don't want to work for a company. They're an entrepreneur, they're gig working. Now it's easy for them to get healthcare. So that's a huge step forward. And there were cost controls in that, but it's very worrisome. And what's particularly worrisome is we are an aging country. You know, you are a much younger country. So our healthcare costs are only going to increase because we're going to have a lot more of our population over 60, where most of the healthcare, you know, spending is driven by. So it's a stain on our country that we spend that much on healthcare, and we don't cover everybody, and our outcomes aren't better. It's not like we've got amazing outcomes compared to the rest of the world, you know? And it's also really frustrating because there's healthcare innovations that come from every country, but there's a lot of healthcare innovations that come from my country, and we're very proud of it. So that part of it is working pretty well, but we're not getting. And by the way, the other thing I'd add is in America, we have a crisis of doctor and nurses shortage right now. that's only predicted to get worse. And the pandemic made it hard because I'm sure here in Indonesia, it was really hard for healthcare professionals. But my guess is most of you treated healthcare professionals like the heroes that they were and are. You know, in America, a lot of healthcare professionals got attacked for saying to their patients they should get vaccinated. So there's a lot of healthcare professionals that have left. So fewer doctors, fewer nurses, costs are going to go up. So I don't have a lot of answers for you. I have a lot of reasons for why it's so expensive, but we got to get serious about this because the problem's only going to get worse.
Oke, dari daerah sini, silakan yang kotak-kotak. Boleh, ya mikrofonnya boleh diberikan atau saya harus ke sana? Di atas, Mbak, silakan.
Good afternoon. My name is Lucas Gabriel. I'm currently studying business administration. Earlier you mentioned about data and how leaders to bring hope. But in this day, we see a lot of populist leaders that boasting a big slogan. But sometimes we have question about that. But yet people see hope in that kind of populist leader. I mean, in the US, Obama and Trump have a very different campaign. So why the American public switch their preference to a more populist rhetoric that Trump brings? What went wrong with the US? Why the switch so drastically from Obama to Trump? Maybe there is something that Indonesia can learn from the US experience in Obama and Trump presidency. Thank you.
The famous Obama-Trump voter. And there was a larger number of them than people thought. And so I would describe it as this. Obama and Trump, very different, very different. But voters thought that in those elections, they were the two candidates that most understood the struggles of working people. Obama, because of his background, Trump, you know, because he's seen as like the fighter for the working class. Now, I don't know how you say bullshit in Indonesian, but
Omong kosong.
okay, that's what it was. But people saw him as, but they did see him as an outsider too. Both Obama and Trump were political outsiders. They came from outside of the system. And so even though they had different policies, different styles, you know, right now in America, like in most countries, the economic inequality is very stark between a worker and the wealthy, between the boss and the worker. And so they are looking for outsiders who will really change the system because people are dissatisfied. And Trump was seen as a celebrity. His name's on buildings. He had TV shows. People was like, well, this guy's got to be smart. And he's interesting. And he doesn't use political language. So Obama is an orator, meaning he can reach really high places with his speeches. But they tended to be plain language. Like he spoke like most people spoke. A lot of politicians don't. Trump did too, in different ways. So that's really what it was, but undergirding all of it is people are dissatisfied with their economic situation and they're very concerned about their economic future. So that's why elections in America are so volatile now and will continue to be. You know, eventually I think we'll have multiple parties, but right now it's like Republican, Democrat, and people say, hey, it ain't working. So I think that's the reason. But, you know, Joe Biden, who beat Trump, you know, is not the most exciting candidate, but enough people chose him because they wanted kind of a return to normalcy, I think, you know, less of the hatred, less of the attack. But, you know, populism is always powerful in politics. There's positive populism, and I think there's populism that pits people against each other in a country, against countries, very nationalistic. I don't think that is a smart thing to do, but it can work. So, but there were, you know, probably in our country, 5 to 6% of the people who voted both for Barack Obama and Donald Trump. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when there's not that many swing voters, undecided voters, it's a lot. And no, there's some people that are now saying, okay, Obama, Trump, Biden, some of those voters then voted for Biden. And it could be in the next election, they vote for a Republican if it's not Trump. So you could see voters, really moving around a lot. It's not most voters. This is the thing that remember about politics in most countries. Most people tend to vote for the same type of candidate, the same party. So some people will say, well, if most people now are going to vote, why are like campaigns so important? Well, because the people who decide those campaigns, a close election, are the marketplace that matters. So that's where you're focusing your time and attention. And so, yeah, a lot of people voted for both of those candidates. And in America, we are unique in this respect. I mean, there's other countries. You can come from nowhere and succeed. That's still, with all the challenges of our country, that is a healthy thing. By the way, in business and politics, you don't have to you don't have to be a member of a party for a long time to succeed. You don't have to be a member of a family. You don't have to be well known. You don't have to have any money. That's true here too, but in America, that tends to be an attribute that we still hold dear. And so Trump, even though he was, actually he's not that successful, but he was seen as a successful businessman. He was new to politics, brand new. People thought he's going to shake up the system. And so that appealed to them. And he ran kind of an anti-elitist campaign, which is interesting for somebody who goes to the bathroom in a gold bathroom, but he ran an anti-elitist campaign that people bought into.
I think we have one more opportunity for one question. Ini dari fakultas ya, Mas Marcel. Oke, Mas Marcel. Bukan, ada yang ingin tadi yang bertanya dari fakultas. Siapa? Ada yang Mas Muli, siapa dari fakultas yang namanya Pak Marcel? Pak Marcel, Ibu Marcel. Pak Marcel. Bapak. Dari fakultas apa dari ini? Bapak dengan Pak Marcel? Baik, gimana? Ini juga, Pak, ini terakhir ya. Jadi harus bagus sekali pertanyaannya. Harus bermanfaat sekali untuk kita semua yang ada di sini dan ada di Zoom. Beban loh. Iya, silakan. It has to be a good question. Jadi intinya
It's such a good question. So I think what the best political leaders do is they tell voters, here's what I believe. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I want to do it, right? So then they get into office. This is true particularly for executive offices. Well, I'll say one thing before I get to the promises. What you quickly learn in every executive office is the world is different when you get in. A crisis happens. And an executive has to deal with a crisis. even if it takes time away from your priorities, even if you do things that seem opposite to what you promised the voters. Like a good executive has to be on top of things like the pandemic. You know, when I was in the White House, we had, as we have in America, massive school shootings. So guns became a really more important issue. We had the Arab Spring. We had the earthquake in Japan and the tsunami, which became a big issue for us. We had, you know, still the aftermath of the financial crisis. So many things happening that weren't really in your control. You know, we had a Euro fiscal crisis. Okay, no voter cares that you're spending time on the European fiscal crisis. They don't want you to spend time on that, but you have to. You quickly learn in executive offices, there's a bunch of stuff you just have to deal with if you're responsible. Then the question is, with the rest of your time, the rest of your bandwidth, how do you get your agenda through? So you have to then prioritize, because you probably say, here was my 6 big promises. You get in office and you say, actually, we probably can only get 3 through. So A, you got to prioritize. You know, explain by voters why the other 3 you can't do right now. Why is that? You don't have the votes. You know, fiscally, it's not possible, whatever. But you got to be honest about that. What people don't like is, wait, you spent all campaign talking about this, and now you're not talking about it anymore. And then if you're able to get some things done, it's really important to celebrate those and report back to the people so they see that you delivered on something that was important. And as I mentioned in my first remarks, you got to do some storytelling around that afterwards. Otherwise, I can't tell how many times in politics I have done research, you know, polling or focus groups of voters, and you ask them about something your candidate actually did, and they don't know you did it. The problem. You got to make sure they know you did it, and then you got to let them know repeatedly, the voters, how you did it. But that's a really important question. It's prioritization, ruthless. Because listen, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. And I do not think a campaign should be limited solely by the things you're sure you can pass in legislation. Because you have to capture people's imagination of the kind of country and society you want to build. But you've got to be careful that when you get in office, you're able to deliver some of that, but also understand a lot of your time is going to be taken up by crisis, right? It just is. And by the way, good leaders realize that that could mean they're not going to get reelected. And by the way, this is my biggest issue with Trump. I'm a Democrat, he's a Republican, it's not that. To not take the pandemic seriously, okay, was to me unforgivable and should be historically shameful. To downplay it, to not take it seriously. So that is what leaders understand quickly, is you can't hide from problems not of your making. Stuff just comes to your door and you got to let it in. Even if it's hard, even if it hurts you politically, even if it chews up. Listen, like Obama, when he first ran, remember, it was, we're gonna end the Iraq war. We're gonna give health care to everybody. We're gonna start a green energy revolution. We're gonna change the tax code. We were able to do some of that. I'm proud of a lot of it. But the big thing people saw him doing was spending a lot of money to bail out industry to stop the financial crisis. That is not the screenplay we would have written. It was just the pile left on our door. And you just have to understand that. And a lot of leaders struggle with that because they don't want to deal with the stuff that like is ugly and may hurt them politically. But the other thing you will learn about leaders, executive leaders, anything that's easy would have been settled somewhere else in government, up the chain. If it comes to your desk, it's hard. It probably involves 2 bad choices. I've been in very few meetings where it's like super challenging, super hard. And it's like, oh, here's the answer that everybody's going to love. That doesn't exist usually. You know, the old expression, you know, you choose your poison. Is it hemlock or is it arsenic? That tends to be what you're faced with. And by the way, one way leaders deal with that, I think in challenging, you know, news media, business, you got to have some humor around it. Not like in how you're dealing with a decision, but a good culture has that like gallows humor, the ability to be like, oh, here's another crisis, our lucky day, that sort of thing. So you don't get like in a victim mentality, because generally, yeah, you got to make a tough decision or a tough call, but people are suffering out there. They're the real people who are the victims, right? So it's such a great question, but no leader is able to execute their entire promised agenda. They just aren't. And so you got to pick carefully about what ones you can get done. And a good leader, back to the question about compromise and collaboration. We had I don't know, many of you probably don't know this name, but one of our presidents a long time ago, 40 years ago or so, his name was Ronald Reagan. He was a famous actor, conservative. But his standpoint was, I would rather get 80% of what I want than insist on 100% and never get it. And I will tell you, that's kind of a lost art. I would argue you should be comfortable with 60%, but he was comfortable with 80%. But a lot of leaders will say, hey, I committed to this, and if it's not 100% of what I want, I'm not going to do it. And to me, that's so foolish, but that is a pretty profound, I mean, we've seen a lot of that in the United Kingdom. We certainly see that in the United States. We saw some of that with some of the governments in Australia through the years. So that is an insidious thing. Like I always say, take the victory. Voters don't care that it wasn't 100% of what you promised. If it's mostly what you promised, they're just going to be pretty excited that you delivered on something and hopefully they get some benefit from it. They don't care if it was 80% or 70%, or the design was a little bit different, or the implementation was a little bit different. Like those are just details. They're important details, but from a leadership standpoint, you should just be happy you delivered on a core promise, even if it's a little bit different than how you envisioned it, right?
Very well. So I would like to close this session with a fireside question. It's a rapid fire. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can only mention a word or a sentence.
Wow.
If I mention this word or a sentence, okay? We begin. US election 2024.
Ugly.
Democracy in general.
Threatened.
Donald Trump. Take a while.
Okay. Dangerous, dumb, evil. I would say a fourth word that begins with D that I hope, but I won't say that.
Very well. Most difficult political experience. Yeah.
So many campaigns. See, I'm already violating. Obama 2012, because I was within the White House, we were governing, but also running for re-election. I'm used to not sleeping much. I'm going to go a little long. I'm used to intense hours. This was brutality for months and months and months. It tested every fiber of all of our beings. It was brutal. It was almost, when it was done and we won, more relief than exhilaration.
Facebook.
Many questions.
TikTok.
Many questions.
Gun reform or regulating sugar in the US.
Both needed desperately.
Okay.
I would choose guns over sugar.
Both killers.
Both killers, and both in America embrace too much.
Swing voters or undecided voters? Which one is more challenging as a strategy?
Well, I see them as both. So here, an undecided voter could be someone who's likely to vote in a certain way, but they're just not professing it. A swing voter is someone who's truly undecided that remains open to your candidate or party. So the swing voter becomes prominent.
Okay. Now entering Indonesia section. Most memorable Indonesian dish so far the past 3 days.
I've eaten so much. What is this? The fried rice dish with seafood.
Okay.
Oh, so good.
Okay. Indonesia in general.
Lovely.
Young voters.
We need you.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Plouffe. Acara saya kembalikan ke MC.
All right, what an amazing presentation and answer coming from Mr. David. I'm positive that we're all getting great insights from it. Also, don't we agree that the question and answer left by Ms. Andini was very engaging and fascinating? Sadly, time flies fast, people say, and so it marks the cue to the end of this event. But before we end this public dialogue session, we have certificate, placard, and souvenirs to Mr. David and Miss Andini. To Miss Fibria Indriati and Professor Eko Prasojo, may you come to the stage to give our honorable guests their souvenirs. All right. The first souvenirs is for Mr. David that will be given from Professor Eko Prasojo. May Mr. David come to the stage? All right, the next one is for Ms. Andini that will be given from Ms. Fibria Indriati. All right, the next one is the placard that will be given first for Mr. David by Professor Eko Prasojo. All right, and the next one is for Ms. Andini that will be given by Ms. Fibria Indriati. Okay, as Ms. Andini and Mr. David have received the souvenirs, we may have a photo session together. Oh, and another thing first, ladies and gentlemen, may you all stand up from your seat and face the stage to take photos together with our honorable guest star. Para hadirin terhormat mungkin bisa langsung merapat ke tengah aja biar kelihatan. Oke, mungkin aba-aba bisa dari saya. I will count backwards. In 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, another one. 3, 2, 1, smile. All right.
Sebelum bubar, halo, mungkin dalam kesempatan ini Ya, kami juga ingin memperkenalkan program Magister Kebijakan Publik dan Governansi ya. Ini salah satu prodi baru di TIA yang berada di bawah Departemen Ilmu Administrasi Negara yang ini berupaya untuk menghasilkan analis kebijakan ya seperti itu. Nah mungkin dalam kesempatan ini sebelum penutupan ya kita bisa saksikan video terkait dengan MKPG. Bisa diputerin Mas video MKPG-nya.
Oh,
Entering the era of dynamic and collaborative governance, where bureaucracy and public sector governance are synergized with various multidisciplinary perspectives. Health, food, technology, AI, big data, and other aspects. Proper and holistic database policy management is needed to create impactful and effective policies and governance. Faculty of Administrative Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, respond to these challenges by opening the Master of Public Policy and Governance Study Program. This program prepared for those of you who work or want to have competence in the public sector as policy analysts. Optimize your career and becoming an expert in your field. You will be invited to explore various multidisciplinary and practical perspectives with a research-based learning approach. Study public policy and governance with relevant real cases and projects. Learn more about this program at
Oke, demikian. Semoga ya bisa menambah katakan pengetahuan Bapak Ibu tentang prodi baru kami dan kami tunggu partisipannya. Terima kasih.
Master of Public Policy and Governance Program.
Baik, dengan selesainya penayangan video ini, maka ikut berakhir pula acara hari ini. Saya selaku Master of Ceremony untuk hari ini mengucapkan banyak terima kasih kepada para peserta yang telah meluangkan waktunya untuk hadir dan mengikuti jalannya Public Dialog pada hari ini. Saya Farah Nisrina pamit undur diri. Mohon maaf apabila ada kesalahan kata. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Entering the era of dynamic and collaborative governance, where bureaucracy and public sector governance are synergized with various multidisciplinary perspectives. Health, food, technology, AI, big data, and other aspects. Proper and holistic database policy management is needed to create impactful and effective policies and governance. Faculty of Administrative Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, respond to these challenges by opening the Master of Public Policy and Governance Study Program. This program prepared for those of you who work or want to have competence in the public sector as policy analysts. Optimize your career and become an expert in your field. we will be invited to explore various multidisciplinary and practical perspectives with a research-based learning approach. Study public policy and governance with Earl Handler cases and projects. Learn more about this program at Master of Public Policy and Governance program.